My name is Austin Kelmore. My talk is Glasgow Unions in the Games Industry. Very, very broad talk. I've never given this specific talk before, so as part of it, I'm going to be talking about the history of Glasgow. Obviously, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here originally, so I find that mildly ironic. But I do know the history of unions quite well, and so if I ever get anything wrong, please don't hesitate to just tell me. That's okay. I'm not offended. But I did try and do as much research as I could to try and get things right, so I'm not just winging it. Cool. So who am I? Probably a good thing to start with. So I'm a game developer. I've been working in games for 18 years now or something like that. These are some of the games I've worked on, and I would be curious if anyone knows what the game in the top left is. Yeah, so the top left one is a game called This is Vegas. It got 99% completed and then got canceled. And that was my very first game. Yeah, the rest are Plants vs. Zombies, Shadow of Mordor, and when I worked on that, it was actually a Batman game, not a Lord of the Rings game. Fun story. Bejeweled, Assemble with Care, Fear 3, and Zuma's Revenge are the other ones. And I've worked on a bunch of others to that too. But the other thing that I do a lot of is I've co-founded 3 organizations related to the games industry and collective power. So the bottom one, IWGB Game Workers, is what I'm kind of talking about here. It's the union for UK game workers. And Game Worker Solidarity is a website and archive that tracks all the actions that game workers have taken across the world. In many, many forms. And then No Games for Genocide is working with BDS to figure out how to give actions to people that they can take to help pressure Microsoft to end its complicity in the genocide in Palestine. So a much heavier one, but the other ones are also heavy sometimes too. So before I start, I really want to ask, just to get a sense of the audience, who has family who are in unions? And you don't have to answer if you don't want, but I'm just curious. Cool. Who here is in a union? All right, small group over there. All right. And then who knows very little about unions? Excellent. Good, good. Okay. So I can, all right, we got a smattering of everything. That's fantastic. So a short history of Glasgow's radicalism. I found it especially interesting and also ties into some of what I'm doing today, which I did not expect. Many, many years ago in 1903, the British Socialist Labour Party was founded in 1903. I don't think it was specifically in Glasgow, but it's an important reason for that. And then the IWW was a union, and it's the Industrial Workers of the World, and it was originally founded in Chicago. And that's also relevant, I promise. The British Socialist Labour Party adopted a policy of industrial unionism. And for those who don't know, industrial unionism means we're going to organize entire industries all at once. And prior to that, oftentimes there were what's known as craft unionism, which is organizing along the lines of disciplines, kind of. So you actually see craft unionism in the film industry, where they have the Producers Guild and the directors and the stagehands and the audio crew, and they're all kind of like individual, whereas what we're doing in the games industry is more industrial, which is everyone's in the same union. We're all organizing together. And so there's different pros and cons for that, but that's kind of how the IWW was well known for that. And in fact, they're still active in Glasgow and all around the world right now. In 1906, as part of the IWW, part of the IWW, the British Advocates of Industrial Unionism was founded, or maybe that was part of the socialist group. And then in 1908, they were refounded, the same group, by the into the Industrial Workers of Great Britain, the IWGB. And as you probably saw in some of my previous slides, our union is also the IWGB. but it's not this one, so I will talk about that later. But for Glasgow specific stuff, so that's just kind of like some long backstory. So who here knows of the singer strike of 1911 in Glasgow? 2 people. Yes, all right. Cool. So this is really, really interesting. Back in 1911, they were trying to fight redundancies. And they were also fighting something called Taylorism. And Taylorism is basically, we're going to try and get people to focus on one tiny little aspect of the whole development process, and then we're going to try and get them to do it as fast as humanly possible, sometimes faster, and then that's how we produce things as much as possible. Now, that's great from like a production standpoint. That's terrible from a human, like I'm living and trying to work my job. And you can actually see in the games industry how that plays out sometimes. We have JIRA tickets, where we have multiple JIRA tickets in a row, and we're told to just do them as fast as possible, so we have our individual tasks. So they were fighting against this in 1911. We're kind of fighting against this in the games industry right now. So they were supported by the IWGB. 11,000 people went out on strike as part of the strike in Glasgow. So the Singer strike, for those who don't know, Singer made these sewing machines, very, very famous sewing machines, and each person did some little aspect of it. This strike was started by women walking off of the line. And then a couple days later, basically more and more people came out until it was 11,000. So it was supported by the IWGB of the time, the Industrial Workers of Great Britain. And the company, as part of the strike, tried to undermine it and sent out cards to all of the workers asking if they would be willing to cancel the strike. And it was very confusing. That's not how it works these days, but the workers eventually kind of crumpled and then went back into work, and the company fired all the leaders of the strike. But it was a very important moment. I mean, can you imagine getting 11,000 people to just walk off the job, like all in the same workplace? That's incredible. Like that doesn't happen these days right now. So the second one, I hope more of you have heard of this, the Glasgow rent strike. So how many have heard of this before? Yeah, more of you, okay. There's a really cool exhibit, and I can't remember, what's the name of the museum that's down by Glasgow Green? The People's Palace. Anyway, September 1915, there was a massive rent strike. So Glasgow landlords announced a 25% rent increase. Obviously people can't really pay that. So Glasgow Women's Housing Association and the Clyde Workers Committee basically tried to fight back against this. 20,000 families participated in it, and they actually ended up winning. So they got the Increase of Rent and Mortgage Interest Act of 1915 was introduced, and they froze rent increases at 1914 levels unless landlords could prove improvements were made. So this was like a really, really, really big deal, and I believe it was started in Govan, like one of the first actions. So pretty incredible. And then the third one, the Battle of George Square. Who's heard of this one? Yeah, only a couple. Cool. We're all learning something. So on Friday, the 31st of January, 1919, this group of people were fighting for a 40-hour work week. At the time, it was 47 hours, and so they were trying to reduce it down to 40 hours. So current estimates are that there were 20,000 to 25,000 strikers, and the left one you can see, or the left one here, what I think is really, really interesting is that it looks like it's all men. I'm kind of really curious where all the women were. But the right one, you can see there's a tank. What? They brought in 6 tanks to try and break this up. And yeah, 2 of the people who organized this were charged and convicted, William Gallagher and Emmanuel Shinwell. And Gallagher stated, "We were carrying on a strike when we ought to have been making a revolution." So the reason they brought in tanks was 1919 was 2 years after the Russian Revolution, and there were other revolutions in Europe as well, and so they were really worried that there was going to be a revolution in Glasgow. Kind of funny to think about because that doesn't really happen when you have a tank coming through the city, but yeah, absolutely bonkers. So there's like a really rich history of pushing back against things, and all three of these are related to things that we deal with these days. So, you know, trying to deal with redundancies or push back against redundancies, trying to stop, you know, speed up work, rent increases, which we all deal with, and then, you know, trying to get a reduction in hours that you work. So they were fighting these, we're still fighting these. So what is the root cause of all these issues?
Capitalism.
Ah, yes. So, yeah, this is mildly ridiculous, but also somewhat true. So I do talk about capitalism a lot, and yeah, it's kind of a ridiculous thing that hopefully not too ridiculous, and folks are somewhat aware of what it is. But basically, it's the you know, I love this quote because it's the very success of capitalism that the chance to be exploited in a long-term job is now experienced as a privilege. Like, you know, tenure in academia, or like, you know, there are very few people in the games industry I know that have had the same job for 10 years, and that's not even that long. I don't know anyone who has ever retired in the games industry, and I've been working in it for 18 years. So like, it is a ridiculous nature. And so like, we talk about capitalism as like a like system that we live in, and or you know, the economical system that we live in. But what we oftentimes don't talk about are the capitalists. So Scrooge McDuck is like the, you know, archetypical really bad guy, although he's good in the actual like comics. But you know, he literally hoards gold, and like the people who do the work don't have that gold. They're probably, you know, very poor. And so I think it's always important to contextualize the people who are participating in capitalism so that we can keep them in mind. Because what I always like to try and talk about and point out is that all of these are decisions that people make every single time. And so they choose to hoard wealth. They choose to pay people less. And this isn't always the case. Like, there are some people who you know, try and do things equitably. But for large corporations, which we'll talk about later, oftentimes they don't choose to be good to the workers. And that's why I'm here talking about this kind of stuff. So large-scale capitalists try and build an empire, and they want us to build it for them because they can't build it themselves. There's literally no way. But only so long as we're compliant. So if we do what they tell us, they will give us the money. If we don't do what they tell us, they try and force us to do what they want. Or they kick us out and take away our money and income and stuff like that. This is kind of a spicy talk. But I don't like to like doom and gloom all the time. I love this quote from Ursula Le Guin. She's a science fiction author, or was. She says, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable, but so did the divine right of kings. I find that mildly ironic because there is a monarchy here. But in the US, there is not." And I think, I mean, even within Europe, several of the countries got rid of their monarchies, and those existed for centuries, you know? And so, like, we think capitalism has always existed and will always exist. And I think what she's saying is, that's not the case. It can't change. The past we inherit, the future we build. And I think this is really important too. Like, it's the Durham Miners Association motto. And they're effectively saying, like, yes, there's all this history of capitalism and monarchy and stuff like that. And like, it is a lot of work to change, but we actually can. We can build a different future. So what can we do to change these like big monolithic things? Don't panic, organize. So I love this. I actually have this on a t-shirt which is kind of ridiculous in many ways. But, fish do really group together so that they're not picked off one by one. They don't really go attack the shark, but I'll take the artistic license, and I love the little motto. And in this particular case, in the games industry, what I'm talking about is unions. So for those who don't know what this picture is, does anyone know what this picture is? Does anyone know who that is?
Is that an actress?
Yes.
Sally?
Yes.
Sally Rooney?
Sally Fields.
Fields.
Yeah. So this was one of her earlier movies in 1979 called Norma Ray. And it's based on the true story of Crystal Lee Sutton. This particular scene, if I am correct, she's standing on top of a table holding this sign, and all her coworkers are around her. And I love that. I love that visual thing, having people around in a giant factory doing that. And one of the other things I love too is that she's one of the workers. So unions are not some third party that comes in and helps people. It's literally the workers that are part of the union. And so you're working with your coworkers to try and improve things, whatever that might be, your choice. And so I love that I get to explain this, especially for people who don't really know unions. So what have workers in unions won? So the 8-hour workday, that was a big one. We literally saw the Battle of George Square trying to get the 8-hour workday. Paid holiday, sick pay, maximum working hours, health and safety protections, parental leave, and they abolished child labor. And another big one for the UK as well is unions and workers within them were instrumental for forming the NHS. Pretty big stuff. And it's weird to think about a world without those, right? Yeah, and overtime pay too. Yeah. So basically, could you imagine working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week? Because that's what some people were doing. That was their entire life. So being able to fight constantly to win these so that we can enjoy them today. So in the games industry, some of these we're still fighting for. And so in the games industry, there's 3 major unions. There's the Writers' Union, the Writers' Guild of Great Britain, WGGB. They focus, they also do it for writing in general, so not just specific to the games industry. There's the IWGB Game Workers. We organize all different types of workers. And then Equity does actors. And so voice actors in the games industry are oftentimes part of this. They also, are actors in other industries like film as well. So my union is the IWGB Game Workers. Who are we and what do we do? So fun fact, we're named the Independent Workers of Great Britain. And you might think that's very similar to the other union that we talked about earlier. So when these folks founded the IWGB in 2012, it was founded by Latin American cleaners who predominantly spoke Spanish, not English. And they were organizing for better working conditions. And so they started this union, and they became such a force that our union's actually bilingual. So everything is done in Spanish and English. And if you ever go to our annual general meetings, we have live interpretation for both of them, which I think is really cool. It's the only organization I've ever been a part of that does that. But when they went to the government office to form the union, they said, we want to be the industrial workers of Great Britain. And the office came back and said, you can't name yourselves that, because there was a union that was in the early 1900s named that. And the Industrial Workers of Great Britain, I think, shut down in the 1920s or something like that. So it wasn't around for super, super long, but you can't use the same name again. So on the spot, they're like, independent? Great, let's go with that. So that's how the Independent Workers of Great Britain name came about. And so we are a union predominantly focused on organizing in precarious or previously unorganized industries. So we focus on cleaners in facilities, couriers like Deliveroo or Uber Eats. There's the cycling instructors, people who teach people how to ride bicycles, foster care workers, and the IWGB Game Workers. We also just have a general members branch for anyone who wants to join. Yoga teachers, Uber drivers. There's 12 different branches. And yeah, and we're a member-led union, which means all positions in the game worker branch and the wider union are democratically elected for a term of 1 to 2 years, depending on the role. But the thing that I like to point out about this that makes it very different from companies is any member can run for the general secretary position, which is kind of like the head of the union. So Henry is the current general secretary, and he was a cleaner. And 5 years ago, he became general secretary, something like that, I think. Yeah, but he was around since the founding of it. So yeah, it's just kind of really interesting to think, like, you know, imagine yourself running for CEO position, and like you can actually do that in the union, which I kind of love. And another thing that's really interesting about our union that's very different from many other unions, all staff are paid the exact same wage. There's an hourly rate, and everyone is paid it. And it's the London living wage plus £3 per hour, which is pretty interesting. So the general secretary, the literal kind of top of the union, as it were called, and you know, someone who has just started at the very bottom makes the exact same wage, which makes salary negotiations really, really easy because they don't happen. Who are the IWGB and what do we do? So we've fought for and won, oftentimes by striking, but not always. We've saved jobs during mass redundancies, brought out source workers in-house. We've achieved union recognition and collective bargaining rights for a bunch of different companies. Zaum is the one most recently for the Game Workers branch. We get paid time for union activity if you have union recognitions, and we've gotten pay rises and future pay tied to the London living wage, similar to how staff are. We've gotten people 6 months paid sick leave, 5 additional days of holiday. These are amongst all the different branches, not the specific game workers. And then additional worker rights via improvement in employment status, because oftentimes employers are like, oh yeah, you're a 0-hour contract. And it's like, no, you're not actually, even if they think you are. Right, so let's talk about Rockstar. So I accepted this talk before what happened with Rockstar. Is there anyone who does not know what happened with Rockstar? No, it's okay. Great, okay. So, small little games company. You ever heard of it? Yeah, primarily based in Edinburgh, but obviously they make Grand Theft Auto, massive, massive game. They recently came in the news for firing 34 workers organizing in unions, 31 of them in the UK, 3 in Canada. And they claim it was for leaks or something like that, but they've never shown what the leaks were or anything like that. They've never given proof. It's this vague leaks thing. And the workers were fired with very little notice. Some were literally called and told that they were fired. Some were, you know, sick or on leave of some sort, and so like out of the blue get a phone call from HR and we're like, hey, you're fired. And really hardly any proof of wrongdoing, you know, just kind of like vague statements rather than like, here's the specifics, you can actually contest them. No, it's not that. And so Rockstar didn't really talk with them about the things that the workers were doing wrong, per se, and I put that in air quotes because like they really haven't even said what it is. But you know, there's a different way that this could have been handled. Let's take them at their word for a moment and say like, okay, maybe the workers were doing something wrong. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. There's a different way they could have approached this. They could have pulled people into a room and said like, hey, what you're doing is not okay for whatever reason. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's do something. And the reason I know this is because I've had this happen to me before. Very early on in my career, working on that game that got canceled, and this was like 15 years ago, I talked to a journalist when I shouldn't have. And this is like my fault. I was very new to the industry. I was young, kind of stupid. And I got pulled into the CTO's office, and he was like, you did this thing you really shouldn't have. Learn from it, never do it again. And I was like, thank you, I'm gonna go on my way now. And I did, I learned from it. And so Rockstar could have done that with these workers if this was actually the case with them. I don't think it was, but I'm just saying there's alternatives here. And speaking from personal experience, I've also been fired. Not at my first job, but like at a different job. And it's horrible. Like some of the workers were on visas, and if you don't know anything about that system, if you lose your job, you might have to leave the country. And if your partner is attached to your visa, like mine was, they might have to leave the country too. And so like it has huge ramifications to fire people. And what I'm trying to show is that the company took very little care in any of that with the people that were working at their company. And I think they wanted to send a message. This is my personal take. I think they wanted to stop people organizing a union within their company. But the workers did not actually take that sitting down. So there's one aspect of this, or I guess two aspects of this. This is outside Rockstar's headquarters in Edinburgh. Like if you flip the camera, right behind it is a giant thing that says Rockstar Games that's on the building. And this has never happened in the UK games industry before. I don't know why I keep going over there, like I'm the only one who's looking at that TV. This has never happened in the UK games industry before. A giant protest outside of a games company for the treatment of the workers. And I love some of the signs, like, "Aw, shit, here we go again." Or the Pinkertons salute you. For those who don't know, the Pinkertons are a union-busting group in the US. They actually still exist. Way back in the early 1900s, they were literally hired to murder people, and they still exist. In Red Dead Redemption, which Rockstar makes, they're the bad guys because they union bust. And so it's kind of ironic that Rockstar's doing this to their own workers. Yeah, so the second aspect is the IWGB, the union that I'm a part of, issued legal claims against Rockstar over the unfair dismissals of staff. And for those who have never been through the legal system before, that takes a really long time. But the protests are a way to show immediate support and impact for the workers. And tons of people came out for the protests. There are some tomorrow. So there's some in Edinburgh tomorrow. There's some in New York tomorrow. We've had them in London at, I'm jumping ahead, but I'll show you. So this is also, I think, in Edinburgh. And I kind of love this for multiple different reasons. So 200 Rockstar staff write to management in support of unfairly fired union members. These are people who still work at the company. That said, and they put their name to it, that said, we want these people reinstated. That's scary, to have just seen your coworkers fired and be willing to stick your head up and say, that's not okay. And I love this. That's really, really cool that they got that many people. Because imagine getting 200 people to sign a petition and saying yes, I'm willing to do that. That's really cool. Second thing is, the people who showed up to this protest, some of them were not game workers. Some of them were people in our union, in foster care workers, who came over from Glasgow because we wanted to support the Rockstar workers and show solidarity and just give mental and emotional energy support. And I just think that's really, really cool. So this one was in London at Take-Two. For those who don't know, Take-Two owns Rockstar. So Take-Two is a US-based company, and they own Rockstar, and they have a location in London, so we protested outside of it. You can see the dramatic flares. What you can't see are there's massive drums that people have, so they make a whole bunch of noise. It's quite intimidating if you're not on the fun aspect side of it, but yeah, and you can even see, actually the guy with the bullhorn right there, his name's Henry, he's our general secretary. So, and then Maritza is the vice president, she's right next to Henry. And then, is there Alex somewhere there? I think Alex is there somewhere, he's the president. But yeah, I just wanted to show that it means a lot to workers to have people come out and say, we're not going to take this, and we're willing to invest time and energy. So one thing that I kind of want to talk about a little bit, you can't stop those in power from being cruel. You can't. There are laws against this, and something that we've found repeatedly is that companies don't follow the law. In redundancies, in harassment cases, in discrimination cases, for gender, race, ethnicity, queerness or disability, they don't stop. I mean, that's not 100%. There are some good people in company management, don't get me wrong. I don't want to broad stroke everyone, but Jamie has done countless casework on horrible situations, and yeah, it's really bad sometimes. And I'm sure if you all think of your experiences at work, how many here have had a bad experience at work, whatever it might be? Yeah, your arm just yes. But what you can do, so you can't stop people, they can always choose to do bad things, but what you can do is you can build enough power so that they fear your collective action more than they want to be cruel. And basically, if we can build up enough power within the games industry, say for instance, we're kind of early days on unionization efforts, but say we had fully unionized all of Rockstar. And Rockstar chose to fire 34 of the workers. And similar to the Singer strike, everyone walks out that day. Just says, we're not taking this. We're literally tools down and we're leaving until you reinstate those workers. Then the next Grand Theft Auto does not get made. And they literally start losing money on that particular aspect. And there's a huge amount of power there, but you have to build up to that. You can't just magic it out of thin air. I wish that everyone knew about the Singer factory strike and that everyone was willing to actually take that action. But most people aren't, for very good reasons. It's scary. They might get fired too. They might lose income. There are tons of reasons to not do it. However, if we can build up the capacity and the understanding, then we can get to the point where we can do this. And there's been many cases of people taking that type of action where just leaving immediately. Wildcat strikes is what they're called. And then the company caves and reinstates them. Done. And so it is possible, and you can stop this kind of stuff or reinstate people. So how do we know it's possible? And where can we find this? So I talked about Game Worker Solidarity, the site that I help run with a couple other people. And I took this screenshot today, and there's 216 actions that you can see. All of the colored countries around the world are the ones that game workers, only game workers, be it video games or TTRPGs or anything like that. And, it's quite a lot of countries. And so I think what I love seeing here is just what people are willing to push back on and fight on. And my personal favorite is an event in Limerick, Ireland in 1980, which was at an Atari factory. Is there anyone who knows? There's got to be some people who know what an Atari was, right?
I've never used one.
Yeah, okay. One of the old consoles before Nintendo's. And they made the entire factory redundant because they were not wanting to make Ataris anymore or moving it off. I'm not quite sure. And the workers occupied the factory in response, literally said, we won't leave the factory, and demanded that they get better redundancy terms. And management was like, okay. So then they won and left. And so I think what I love about that is, like, could you imagine all the redundancies happening in the games industry and people going and occupying the buildings? I can't, but I kind of want to see it. And I love learning from the past. There was a hunger strike by a Nintendo worker in 1950, and that's on here too. And so it's just like learning from the past and seeing what we're willing to do in the present is one of the things I really, really love about this project, which I didn't know before. Part of the reason we did this was because we didn't know what game workers were doing what. And so, like, I do union trainings as well, and this is one of my favorite slides. It's obviously like massive wall of text, so I'm not going to read the whole thing out. But one of the things that's important, I think, is what do you want to win? What do you not have right now at your workplace that you think would be good, that would make your life better, that would improve your working conditions or your community or whatever it is? Are there any here that you're like, yes, I want that? Huh? Profit share? Yeah.
Permanent option on remote working.
Yes.
RTO's been
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Permanent optional remote working is a big thing. I live in Glasgow. I work for a company based in Cambridge. And technically in my contract, it says that they can pull me into the office whenever they want. It's absurd. I've never been there. I've worked for the company for 3 years. Like, that would just be absolutely ridiculous. And actually, Rockstar did that to all their workers. So, was it 2 years ago? Is that right? Something like that. They used to be able to work remotely, and then they pulled them back into the office.
Like, absolutely banned it, like you had to be back in office. I remember that after COVID ended.
So that was one of the things that the workers were fighting as well, and building up power. But one of my favorites is 6-hour workdays. So we work 8-hour days, right? Or most of us do. Or 7.5, whatever it might be. There's a company in Croatia called GameChuck, where they were all work 6 hours, and they negotiated that. And I think that's really, really cool. There are some companies in the games industry as well that work 4-day work weeks. And so that's definitely a possibility as well, with no decrease in pay, I might add. So it's the same pay, one less day of work. So you get a 3-day weekend. And yeah, like there's even some which are very unlikely, like worker ownership of the company. Could you imagine all the workers owning Rockstar? Probably won't happen. But I think it's definitely possible. I mean, if we look to the past of what workers have done and what actions they've been willing to take, we can see how we might be able to take those same actions, or maybe some different ones that are similar. And how could we fight for some of these that we really want? One of the things that I've found, and when I started this whole union journey, I knew zero about unions. You know, I'm from the US originally. I didn't even really know about unions in the US. I was never in one. I only found out afterwards that my parents were in unions. My mom was a nurse. My grandfather was working in the steel industry in the US. So he was unionized as well. But I didn't know about any of that growing up. I didn't even know about that like when I moved to the UK. And so organizing takes persistence and dedication and can be one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do, at least in my perspective. Maybe I should have used me instead of you. But I really do feel like one of the massive things that I've been able to see is just how you can actually affect change in your local communities, be it your workplace or your actual like local community, or even like the UK as a whole. And just be able to see like, okay, if I put in time and energy, I can make this small change and it will dramatically impact people's lives. And it takes a lot of time. It's not like something you can do in just like 1 weekend or 2 weekends. It could take months or years, but I do think it's worthwhile. And so like the union that I'm a part of, we announced a couple months ago, I think, more than that, that we were over 1,500 members. So if you can imagine, we've been around for, I didn't even say it. We formed in 2018, so it's been 7 years just about. December 14th is our 7-year anniversary. And so we're well over 1,500 now. And one of the positives of this shitty Rockstar fiasco is that it's actually like emboldened people to join the union. So it had like the opposite effect, because the Rockstar leadership showed exactly why we need a union, because they summarily fired people with very little reason, dramatically impacted their lives, and that's like the perfect reason to like have a union, to be able to push back against that. And so they've literally like galvanized the entire industry in the UK to try and push back against them, which I think is probably not what they were aiming for, but hey. And I love this quote from Octavia Butler. For those who don't know, she is also a science fiction author, and she wrote some fantastic stuff. You don't start out writing good stuff, you start out writing crap and thinking it's good stuff, and then gradually you get better at it. That's why I say one of the most valuable traits is persistence. The same is true of game dev. Like, can you think back to the first game that you made? It probably was not that good. I know mine weren't. But then you do it for many, many years and you get better and better and better and better and better. And the same is true of organizing, of unionizing. And you learn a bunch, you learn how to approach people, how to talk to people, and it's just, yeah, persistence is one of the like main key things. It takes a while to make change. And so I like to end on this one. You have the power to create change, all of you do, if you so choose. What are you going to do with that power? We're evil. And then, yeah, that QR code goes to the IWGB Game Workers site if you wanted to take a look at it. My name is Austin Kelmore, and you can find me on Blue Sky at austinkelmore.com and my website at austinkelmore.com. Very original names, I know. Yeah, that's me.